Okay, happy Wednesday. Hey now. Good morning, PSW staff, clients, friends joining us for halfway through the week, Wednesday. Yesterday was a lot of fun looking at Koreatown and also thinking about the Tiffany Club, that jazz club that was there. 8th and Normandy, where all those great people played and where Marilyn Monroe, met Ella Fitzgerald and kind of said, this lady can sing. Let's take her to West Hollywood, because West Hollywood was where the Macombo and all those other Ciros. That was more upscale Hollywood elite. And then, but Koreatown, they had cool jazz clubs back in the day, and just wanted to look about that. Revisit Koreatown. We need to know about our neighborhoods here that we live in. It's part of as artists, we need to, our environments, or even if we're not aware, we're very sensitive and attuned to different things in our environment. The weather is one for sure. I don't know if the Beach Boys would have written all those surf songs had they lived in Wyoming, It's just the music reflects your surroundings. So today we're going to look at a class that we did not too long ago, but a neighborhood that's so important and part of downtown Los Angeles, kind of right around there. So today we're going to look at and revisit Chinatown. Chinatown's a neighborhood, right? Although in the movie it's an idea, but I'm not going to go back to the movie. It's a neighborhood, downtown LA. The Chinatown we know today is 1938. That's when it started. So we're going to talk about 3 Chinatowns, because the one that we know of today is the third one. How did Asians get here? Japanese, Korean, South Asian immigrants arrived in the United States around the 1800s, okay? So the original Chinatown started in about the late 19th century. This is the first one. And then it was torn away because Harry Chandler, that we talk about every week, developer, real estate, tycoon, owner of the Times, publisher of the Times, said we need Union Station. And Union Station is what we did a class on, and that was the last huge rail station in the United States that was built. So Old Chinatown refers to the location like Alameda Streets from the 1880s to about 1933. That's when Chinatown is the Old Chinatown. There were 2 different Chinatowns in the 1930s, north of Old Chinatown to replace it, and then there was China City from 38 to 48. That idea was by Christine Sterling, who we looked at, who saved Alvera Street. She tried to do this with the China City, and it didn't really take off. It didn't work. There were fires, other things that happened, and like we talked about, 1937 was the year the movie Chinatown took place, and that was the year when there wasn't a real Chinatown because they were moving it. Okay, so we need our timeline. We've looked at Bronzeville. Bronzeville establishes itself in 1942, and remember, that was Little Tokyo. That was all Japanese immigrants, Japanese Americans. And they got they got relocated to Manzanar because of World War II, because we had concentration camps here. But we didn't kill them. It wasn't like Nazi, but we did lock them up. And these were Americans. So terrible story. Then all African Americans came in and named it Bronzeville, and that became a center for jazz clubs, for quite a few years. Union Station's 1939. So they just said that opens, and that gets rid of the original Chinatown. That's Harry Chandler's idea. So that's what's going on timeline-wise. So supposedly there's 2 different stories, but Joseph Newmark, very rich guy, the story is that he brought the first Chinese person to Los Angeles. It was a servant in 1854. And there's another rumor that there was a Chinese person that was part of the, how those families came from San Gabriel Mission to Alvera Street, that one of them may have been Chinese, but we don't know that. So maybe the servant came, maybe that was true, maybe that wasn't. But by 1862, Congress passes, the railway. So the Central Pacific Railroad is opened, and we need people to work on it. So that's what brought a lot of Chinese westward. And then 1871, so this is kind of before even Chinatown is established, because if we're in 1871, Chinatown's not really until the 1880s. So they're mostly hanging out at Calle de los Negros. Negro Alley is what they called it back then, this is again on where Union Station is. So I'd be remiss to not mention the Chinese Massacre. 1871 is when 19 Chinese men and boys were killed, mostly hanged. They were lynched by a mob of about 500 men in the city. Some were police, and it was a terrible hate racist crime. People in the 21st century described this as the largest mass lynching in American history. So there were all these rumors that the Chinese community were killing white people, and probably that was mostly not true at all. But a lot of they rallied up against, and they got men around on horses, and they gathered up these Chinese and killed them. It was terrible. And most of the people the next day that were, about 111 were taken into court. Most of them were all acquitted. So it was a massacre that happened. So terrible. 1882, Federal Chinese Exclusion Act is saying that, okay, Chinese immigrants can't become U.S. citizens and couldn't buy land. Terrible. So when they do start the old Chinatown, almost nothing remains of that today. So there's nothing of the original. So if you go down there, you're just going to see Union Station. But from 1880 to about 1910, that's the original Chinatown. It was kind of bustling. There was about 15 streets and alleys, about a few hundred buildings, and there was a Chinese opera. There was a theater. There were 3 temples. Even their own newspaper and a telephone exchange. It was thriving. It was good. Then around the 1910s, drugs comes in. Drugs usually ruin communities and things like that. Opium becomes a huge importer, huge seller, and then opium becomes illegal. So then it goes underground. Almost literally, because there are opium dens. Chinatown gets a little shady because of prostitution, opium dens, and by the 30s, a lot of policemen are payoffs. They're on the police roll. It's almost like LA City and the mayors and the policemen. They needed a red light district, and so maybe this was Chinatown. So a lot of and it was hugely famous for gambling houses. And this is where you would go to do those kind of things. So it took a few decades for the Supreme Court to finally say, okay, fine, like you can have a railway system with Union Station. So residents in Chinatown had to leave. We've seen this with Chavez Ravine just a few weeks ago with Dodger Stadium. You're just kicked out. You have to go somewhere else. And so, a lot of them lost their businesses and also lost their homes. A lot of the Chinese, they grew vegetables, and so like I opened the class with by saying that it was cheap labor back then on the railroads. So China City happens when Christine Sterling, the wealthy lady from Oakland, and she comes down to save Alvera Street because they were going to bulldoze it down. And she makes it into a tourist, attraction for better or worse, but it's better than nothing. She tried to do that with the new Chinatown, China City, and it didn't really work. This is also when Little Italy was down there, because we've talked about, we don't really have today Little Italy like other, Chicago, New York, San Francisco. They have Little Italies. We don't, but we did. The neighborhood was Chinatown, Sonora Town. They were all kind of right where Alvera Street is. But a lot of Sicilians, right, as we talked about a few weeks ago with Alvera Street, settled in the old plaza. Many businesses were there, including San Antonio Winery is still there. So in the 30s, after the China City doesn't take off, a little bit north is this third and final Chinatown. That's just called Chinatown now. And a lot of tourists, huge destination for tourists. Chinatown was designed a lot by actually real Hollywood film designers, and a lot of them, Cecil B. DeMille, the director, gave sets that were used in movies, and they kind of made Chinatown a little bit, festive and all that stuff. So they had their home starting from 1938, as we look down the map from there. And then, you know, they prospered during the 80s. Many buildings were constructed for mini malls, for better or worse, but, you know, along Broadway. By the year 2000, many people in Chinatown left for San Gabriel Valley, city of Monterey Park. So there's still a lot of locals that live there too, but around 2000, a lot of them moved out of Chinatown. Philippe's is one of my favorite restaurants. It's been located right on Alameda Street. I guess it was called Alameda back then, but come on. We've talked about street names and pronunciations. We don't call it that right now. But that's at the edge of Chinatown. That's been there since 1951. And then the Phoenix Bakery is very famous. Just wanted to kind of tell you a little bit about the cuisine there. Phoenix Bakery opened in 1938 when the Chinatown, you know, opened. In the 90s, I mean, a lot of art galleries came about, and they started to come up in the neighborhood. Then 2003, the Gold Line opened in Chinatown, so that's going to bring more people in, more local, more Angelenos to Chinatown. And then the LA Historic Park, which I just discovered, you know, 6-8 months ago. That began in 2001 and opened 2017, and that's a beautiful park. So right in Chinatown. Gorgeous. So just a rundown of our Chinatown, our history. And we'll see the results for the movie Chinatown, even though, you know, like we said, just the last scene is filmed in Chinatown. But, you know, still an important LA movie, and this was a LA class. So I hope you enjoyed Chinatown. So many important things that happened down there, aside from the opium dens and, you know, all that kind of scandalous things, and a lot of the tunnels that were there. And remember, we did that class on mobsters and tunnels in Los Angeles, and some of those were through Chinatown. And the movie Chinatown, you know, I mean, we scored that a few months ago, and that was a lot of fun to see, even though that wasn't filmed in Chinatown, just that last scene on Alameda, which they used to call it back then. But really important part of our city, Chinatown. And tomorrow we're going to look at another neighborhood to finish out our neighborhood week and look at something that's different than Chinatown, a little far north, northeast, if that's okay. Okay, so have a great rest of the day. Thanks for watching Chinatown, and yeah, I'll see you tomorrow. Okay, bye.